attorney decides to go since 4 o'clock, because there's a statute that requires a formal mediation.
You go ahead.
We're doing that now, so when we file suit,
I need all the airtime I get.
Yeah.
that requires a quorum at the beginning.
Sure. Just say,
And then everybody can agree to meet without a quorum. That's what I would do the first thing, is I'd agree to that won't be on.
Yeah, and don't say, how can you rent the person?
Well, okay.
Give it up.
Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order, please. This is the City of Canton Council meeting, and this is August 1st, 2019. If you would, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Wilson, will you give the invocation, please?
Yes, I'll be happy to. Please join me in prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for the safety of the children who started back to school today. We pray for the teachers who've had a really hard day. We know it'll get better with your help. We pray for our council tonight. We ask you to help us to make decisions that are the best for all concerned. All these things we pray in your name. Amen.
Okay, next item on the agenda is consideration to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any changes or corrections to be made to those? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if we could put the update from Mr. Harris in as new or old business, since it's something we've discussed before.
It's up to the council, I guess. If they, want to make a motion to amend the agenda to put it somewhere, I guess they can.
The reason I ask is, with a presentation, are we allowed to have dialogue and ask questions?
Oh, we're going to do that. Yeah, we're going to do that anyway as a presentation. Yeah, since they're on the agenda. Yeah, but public input is the one that we don't have the dialogue.
Okay, then never mind.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second. Mr. Yon made the motion. Mr. Grant seconded that motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay. All right. Guests and visitors. First item up is the presentation of the Archer Street parking deck options. Clark Patterson Lee, our engineer here.
You. Good evening. As you all know, we've been working very hard on the parking structure along with Clark Patterson Lee over the last couple of months, and our main goal so far has been to come up with a couple of different layout options so that we could get City Council's input and questions. And so Clark Patterson Lee is here tonight to present the options to you guys, and we will be available to answer any questions and talk about it. I will turn it over to Brian Miller with Clark Patterson Lee. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. So as Bethany said, we've been working now for about 6 weeks on options, and mainly in plan, just seeing the footprint of different garages, different sizes, depending on number of spaces. As you remember, we were shooting for 300 spaces. Each of the options that we initially came up with all achieved that, and they all had different aspects, different pros and cons. And now we've been able to narrow it down to 2 options. And I will start, if I get this right. There we go. So what we're calling option 1, and as you see there in front of you, the right-hand picture is sort of a rendering. shows City Hall and shows the adjacent streets. And then the garage, this is the one option that the entire garage does fit on the current site, the current property, all within the property lines. We end up with just under 300 spaces, about 275 or so, 5 levels, so the garage is 5 parking levels. This option does require a large amount of retaining walls and excavation, which I'll get into on the second option, which means that a lot of the money for the construction goes into pieces of the garage that you technically don't really see. So there's a lot of infrastructure involved just to build the garage, just depending on the shape of the property and the grade change. And so, but either way, we've got it to work. The pedestrian connections, as you can kind of see there, and on the left-hand side is our actual drawing that shows the parking space layouts. But the pedestrian connections, which we were trying to achieve in all the options, were obviously a connection behind City Hall into the garage, and then another one down near West Marietta and Archer Street intersection. So those are the 2 elevations that we were trying to maintain in order for pedestrians to access both locations. One, obviously, to come here, and the second one to access into downtown, so for public parking. The one vehicle access we did include was right off of West Marietta. For 300 or so spaces, one vehicle access is plenty. So we left it there. Given the grade change in what we're dealing with, we do end up sloping a good of the parking, about 6%, which is on the maximum side of what we want to do. So just to compare the two, as I get into the second one, you can kind of see the difference between those. This option also has about the same amount of square footage, but it does end up with less spaces, so the efficiency of the parking is a little bit less than the second option. So if we go to the second one, which we call option 3, since option 2 was removed by our committee, we decided not to pursue it any further. But option 3 is one that we had proposed earlier on as a solution given to the site constraints and the elevation change. We basically take the same garage layout and turn it to where it runs parallel to Archer Street. By doing this allows us to save a good bit on retaining walls and excavation. What it does allow us to do in order to fit the garage into that space, we are able to realign West Marietta Street and tie it in directly to South Church Street, which early on was a goal of the committee to try to enhance that intersection and get away from the angled road that West Marietta makes now, and it becomes it's a 5-point intersection now, and we get it back to more of an actual true intersection with 4 roads. It does clean that up. The garage is a little bit larger, makes it a little bit more efficient, so you can see we're getting just over 300 spaces. It's a lot less excavation, and the ramp slopes are a lot flatter. We go from the 6% we had in option 1 down to about 2.5% to 3%. So it makes the parking level of service is much better from a patron standpoint. We do still have the same pedestrian connections, obviously down at the intersection of Archer Street and Church Street, and then the one here behind City Hall. So that doesn't really change. And the way the garage is laid out from an elevation standpoint, the level that lines up here at City Hall is pretty flat. So we come in right off of that elevator stair tower right into the back end of City Hall here without any major grade change there. So it ended up fitting on the site, given all the other grade changes that we had to deal with. The other big difference between the two options is, going back to option 1 real quick, is the way the garage is laid out, given that it's now along West Marietta, it does put the garage, which is about 50 feet tall, the structure itself, right up against the residential properties that are just south of it on West Marietta. So it does create more of an architectural massing issue. As you come up West Marietta, then the garage will sit on the site and then gain another 50 or so feet above. So it impose a large mass more on the residential side of the property, whereas option 3, since we're turning the garage the other direction, doesn't do that at all, and it leaves a pretty large buffer between that residential section and then the south face of the garage. As you can see, we sort of landscaped the area, and then the vehicular access comes again off of West Marietta, and then creates more of a buffer in that area. So it's a little bit more pleasing, I think, from an architectural standpoint to do that. And as far as overall construction costs, both options are very similar. I think we're less than 2.5% difference. So as you can see, with option 3, we're gaining about 30 more spaces for about the same costs, whereas we're also able to enhance that intersection. So we're taking the money that you normally have in the retaining walls and the excavation in option 1 and putting it into enhancements of the intersection, which you do get something out of in that case for option 3. So, you have any questions or?
Any questions? Mr. Estes?
Yes, sir.
Do you have to take into account any special considerations for the, in option 3 where you move the intersection, or is it okay because it's, I assume, city streets and city kind of dictates kind of the issues?
Larry's our civil engineer. I'll let him try to handle that.
It's kind of like why I hung up here, because I knew you'd want to ask that question, because one of the targeted things in the reports that you've had previously from your other analysis was how can we improve a 5-way, which is actually a 6 if you include the curb cut to this parking lot currently. It's really confusing and it's really tight. So the considerations are you would have to acquire some property. We would have to regrade that section of East or West Marietta and make that section of Church Street a 2-way. But that would clean up that intersection to make it a true 4-way. We'd have to relocate some of the utilities, but we've already taken that into account as a part of the aspect of the cost to make that occur. So that's the approach that we took, so we could have a true side-by-side comparison.
Who determined the weight? Was that internal to you guys, or was it collaboration with city staff?
Talking about the different options.
The weight on the I'm looking at the Excel looking page.
You're looking at the comparison spreadsheet, right? I generated that, and then we share it every time we meet with the staff. So we go over those items. I think every single number in there really hasn't been discussed at detail, but just to sort of give an idea of the difference between the two. Okay. That's sort of where it was. But yeah, and as far as the road alignment, just from an engineering perspective, the way that we have the West Marietta and tying back into Church Street is a free flow, so there's no stop condition there. So that road, actually from an engineering standpoint, acts a lot better than it does today. So traffic would just continue on West Marietta and onto Church Street. So the Church Street traffic, which today goes back to the police station, will be stopped, but there's very little traffic coming north on South Church Street. That's why we've taken the parking off that street, since now we have it in the garage, and then made the road 2-way just in front of the garage. And then we continued the streetscape design all the way around the garage. So basically your new streetscape you have now, which is a 10-foot sidewalk, will go around the garage and down to West Marietta Street.
My only comments, if you wanted them, on the weighting was, I just noticed the last one, massing relationship to site and other buildings, and it feels pretty high in my opinion. I'd put more towards cost and other stuff.
Oh no, sure, and that's sort of just a preliminary number we put in. But both options, from a height standpoint, both options keep the top of the garage below this building, and that was one thing we were trying to achieve. That option 2, reason why it's no longer on here, was actually higher, it was a smaller footprint, but it went up an extra level, which made it higher than this building. So that's why that's on there to start with.
Thank you.
Mr. Grant?
I think my 2 main questions are basically the same, but just confirming that option 3, you are including the cost of the road realignment, the property acquisition.
The property acquisition number is not in there just because we haven't started that process.
Okay.
But everything else, all the utility relocations, the realignment of the road, all that grading, all that is in those costs right now. So.
Road improvements?
Yep.
But not the property acquisition, okay. And then you said both options are lower than this building.
Yes.
How many feet?
Oh,
Or
gosh, I
inches,
think we are close, probably several feet. And when I say lower, on a parking garage, you don't have a roof really to compare with, but the top level has a parapet, and that parapet elevation for each one is several feet below the top of this building.
But approximately the equivalent height, I mean,
It's probably about 4 or 5 feet less than the top of this building.
but the footprint of the
Yep.
either option of the garage is larger than this building, correct?
The footprint, yeah, the overall footprint's a little bit bigger, square footage wise, but the overall mass, just because we're able to place the garage down lower elevation, keeps it from a visual standpoint. If you're traveling down Archer Street, the garage isn't so large that it stands out beyond this building. It'll be comparable, at least down Archer Street as far as what you would view.
I feel like it'd stand out. I mean, my concern is that it would kind of impede the view of this building and just kind of the flow of what we have. If, you know, my concern, and I know we were preliminary talking about, we're going to have 2 levels or 3 levels, and so
Right.
when I see 5 levels and I see the footprint of that and almost the same height as this building, that concerns me, but.
Right. No, that's understandable. And the next step of this process, we'll be getting to the architectural and start seeing renderings of the actual elevation compared to this building, so you can have a better feel for what that would look like.
Okay.
Ms. Wilson?
I just want to confirm there's one entrance and one exit only.
Vehicular.
Both options.
Right, from a vehicular, one
Vehicular,
entrance, yeah.
right.
Pedestrian,
You
there's
drive
2.
in one way and come out the same.
Yep,
same
all off
end.
of West Marietta, right.
Looks like your budget estimates are, one's a little under $1 million, one's a little over $1 million.
That number you're looking at is just the site, the grading utility number. The total cost, I think, is in that spreadsheet as well. It's over, all the way to the right. I think we were looking at total cost for each one around $6 million. That, it should be on that spreadsheet all the way, yeah. all the way.
But that doesn't include acquiring the extra land either.
Right, so if we go that route, then that'll have to be added in as well, sir.
Is there any direct connection between the parking deck and this building?
There would be a pedestrian connection, so we would
And where would it connect to this building?
through this door here. So this would be more of a corridor out, and then the stair elevator tower for the garage, which would be a pedestrian connection, would be just across the drive.
Okay. Anyone else?
Ken had his hand up a minute ago.
Oh, Ken, you had something?
Well, I was just going to address Councilor Wilson. One of the option one is estimated 5.8, the other one's 6.0. It's about a $250,000 difference on the estimated cost between the two. With option 3, you're getting 30 more parking spaces. The acquisition of the property involves one property owner, and it's a very minimal amount that would have to be acquired, and there's a possibility, haven't approached that person yet, but they possibly might donate that.
So this is unimproved property?
Sir?
Unimproved property?
Well, yeah, for the most part, it's part of the property for the old church parsonage, and with the realignment of the
Oh, I
road
see,
and that
yeah.
curve,
Okay.
it would have to cut into
Right, I understand that.
that point right there at Elizabeth Street and Marietta Street.
Right, okay. Mr. Grant?
On option 1, I know you said excavation involved. On both options, how many decks would be subterranean?
Well, technically, none of them would require completely below ground.
Complete, okay.
Each one of them, because they're turned different, so option one, 2 of the levels are below the elevation of right behind us, so basically down into the parking lot that's there today. Option 3, it's really just the one level that gets below, and it's only the one end of the deck that's actually down further, because as we extend the deck out along Archer Street, it really kind of flattens out. So there's really a little bit of that option that's technically below ground. So the garage would be open for the most part all the way around.
And with that, I know we had some discussions and preliminary conversations about ventilation. Would that,
Yep.
that would require ventilation?
That, and then each one
one requires ventilation.
Yeah, each option ends up being what the building code calls open, so we don't have to sprinkle or ventilate the deck. It'll be
On
open
either
air.
option, even in that?
Either option, right.
Okay.
Anyone else have a question?
And both of these options eliminate the existing parking right behind this building.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, that gets completely redone for each option.
How many spaces do we have currently behind this building? And in the lot existing?
There's about 60 in the lower lot, and maybe 23 in this lot.
So we would be
83.
netting in option one would be netting about less than 200.
Yes.
Anyone else?
Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Interesting. Okay, the next item is discussion of Phase 2 of Academy and Main development. Mark Harris and Mr. Good.
Good evening. Robert Good, working with Mark Harris. And thank you all for your time the past week and a half meeting with each and every one of you. Very much going through some of the details of what we're looking at Academy and Main on Phase 2. It's been a very busy week and a half and very, very helpful to have spent time with each of the mayor, city manager, and council walking through where we are at the Academy and Main in Phase 2. A lot of details. We only had so much time during this time that we figured we could do a lot more at those individual meetings. And what we really thought was, and this is almost timing is everything. It's like perfect timing how we were even placed on the agenda, that given where the recent update on the parking deck that just was above us and where we are, we're asking the city council and mayor to consider us as an alternative to what you just heard that would work both for the city and for the Harris Development Group as they proceed with the Phase 2 of Academy and Main. We're very excited about it because listening to the current report on the two options that were just presented, we have the potential, and there's many more details that we can go through. And what we really want to do is have the council consider our alternative so that we could work with the manager and the city staff and come up with a very detailed presentation like you just saw on the current parking options of options 1 and 3 that were provided by Clark, Patterson, and Lee. We are pretty excited about the opportunity for the deck to be considered an alternative location at Academy and Main because we see an opportunity to tie into the mill at Etowah and the development there, as well as the next phase of Academy and Main, and as well as a connection here to the City Hall and to all the things that the city's looking for in their deck. And we're looking right now at a deck that is almost naturally suited for the topography of Hill Street Circle and Hill Street. And our current deck, and we're still working through the details, and we could spend a lot more time on that, but our current deck is looking at about 134 spaces per level that would allow the city's parking of 300 spaces on about 2 to 2.5 of those levels, while we could work with the development that we want to work around that deck on the other levels. And it's just such a beautiful thing with the topography and what God's given us that we can lay that up against Hill Street Circle and really, have that deck buried and also wrapped with an apartment development that would be Class A. And we can go through some of those details, as we move forward here. And I can take more questions, but basically what we'd like the city council and the mayor to consider is our site as an alternative location for a parking deck, and to let us work with the city manager and staff so that we can come back here 30 days or so and present a very thorough presentation on how that works and what we see as the cost. And we're prepared to do that, but we wanted to make sure that we were doing that in concert with the city council and mayor making that decision so that we could work together on these details, because it's a collaboration in doing so, and we're excited about the ability to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions? Mr. Estes?
I guess more of a comment. So I thank you for both of you for spending time with us this week. And
thank you.
I think it was really helpful to kind of hear about what's going on with, currently we can see what's going on, but then I think more importantly, the partnership between the mill and Academy in Maine that can really drive it. I think it is, when any time we're making a potential investment of up to $6 million, certainly that was just presented, I think it's certainly important that we, do consider all options. Just a couple of, just thoughts and questions. So you mentioned 134 spaces per level. How many levels do you think could fit? Maybe it's an unfair question based on what you've already analyzed.
We're working through those details, and we'll be spending more time, but we could see about 5 levels. And because of the topography, it's just such a natural fit to bury some of those levels, and as well as what we see with the private side of it, of wrapping that deck with apartments so that we could basically almost make it invisible. Obviously there'll be an opening off of Academy, and there'll be an opening off of Hill Street, which is one of the unique things, is that we'll have 2 ways to get in and to get out of the deck for vehicular connections. In addition to that, we're really excited, and we'll be spending more time with the details, but we have a great pedestrian connection plan to tie the mill as people walk across Railroad Street to be able to connect in through an elevator from that topography at that level all the way up, bringing into the deck and into the future pavilion that's part of Academy in Maine, where it's completely level to walk to the Academy Maine as well as to the downtown area and to the City Hall. We're just blessed with a great topography on Academy being so flat, and we can bring the pedestrians to and through a very walkable area for a very long-term experience, and also connecting into the mill to really solidify the anchoring of the connection here in the west part of Canton into these 2 projects that tie into the City Hall.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting and important, right? I think a concern that was of mine, at least, was, you've got the mill way down here, and you've got the rest of the activity up here, and then in between is the Academy in Maine development. And so without this, you can't cut through kudzu and slide down the hill, but, going up that one street there to connect is tough. And I know I've heard thoughts of, do we do trolley services, and we could do e-scooters or not. But I think we could certainly, I think it's definitely something that, again, we need to consider as options. And, and kind of echoing off what Ms. McGrew said at the beginning, I think this is something that we should have further discussion on in future meetings, and continue to learn more about the information, you know, that you presented. You know, I guess I personally didn't know that this was even an option when we were going for the original bid proposal on that site. I thought it was just either the old police station or Archer Street parking. And so it's, I think it's definitely, again, when you're making this big of an investment, it's certainly something that we should consider all options. And my last question is, do you have to acquire land to do the current proposal?
The current proposal, part of Phase 2, there is some land that's being acquired that are some of the houses that are already being worked with Mr. Harris, and that's also kind of, it just, all these things kind of come well together to also help with some of these houses that have been around for many, many years. They're beyond functionally obsolescent and their service life, and so it's picking up some of those houses to bring it all the way to Hill Street. And then eventually, you know, we see once this development with Phase 2 is complete, that Phase 3, which is further to the south, is another area that could be further developed by, you know, Mr. Harris and Penn Hodge and others to continue that southward improvement on, again, those houses that are just way beyond their service life.
Yep. No, I think final comment would just be, I think you guys see something special in this area, and it's worth us, again, taking a brief pause and seeing, you know, what other options there are to consider. And so I'd love, you know, I'd ask that we do add this to a future agenda item to consider having more conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Wilson?
Rob, I want to ask you a question, and then I want to ask Mr. Harris a question. The first one, I want to reiterate what you said, that the parking deck will be inside the apartments. They'll be wrapped around, invisible. So explain to me how the city proper would know that this was part of their parking deck as well, and not just belong to the apartments.
Yeah, that's a great question. Giving the accessibility in front of City Hall very level, we could have signage right there to make it clear as people are coming into City Hall or even to the public area that this is a public deck, and we could work on those types of things to make it clear. I think we're still very early in the process, but I think there's ways that it could be clarified that this is where the deck is for people that are new to the city, or people that once they learn it, they'll know that this is the deck. We think it could be a great location in addition, but we could work through that with signage that eventually you may have something on the eastern end, but this would be your western deck. And, you know, and maybe eventually that's also in other literature that's in the city of Canton of where your facilities are. I know like the city of Woodstock has some literature where their certain facilities are, so there's wayfinding and there's other things that we can do to help make sure that the public would know.
And my other question is for Mr. Mark Harris. This is a little bit off the parking deck, but we have several constituents who are asking us about the rental of your other two, like Phase 1, the rental for the old mill offices and the high school. They've been vacant now for a good while. So can you help us and update us on where we are?
Sure.
Or where you are?
We've had a lot of interest in both buildings. We have been very selective, and we pre-qualify and have been pre-qualifying these interested tenants. But we want a nice fit. And in many occasions, when you look at their business plan, their track record, how many stores they have or restaurants they have, it's not exactly what we want at this point, but we are going to stick to our plan, and that would be A-class tenants, because we have A-class buildings, and that's what the city has asked of us, and we're following your comprehensive plan. That's what was asked. So we're going to stick with the A-class tenants, and we have the wherewithal to do that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Both of you, thanks.
Ms. McGrew?
Thank you. How many units do you plan to build in this Phase 2? Number of units?
It's possible. It could be up to about 250 units. We don't see necessarily more than that, and it could be less. We're going to be proceeding. We've done a lot of analysis and design, but there's still much more to go, and we want to make sure we get the right fit and form to those units. We've done a lot along the way, but I don't see much more than 250 at
Will
this
there be
location.
elevators in the buildings?
I'm sorry?
Will there be elevators in the buildings?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
And how many parking spaces are you allotting to each unit?
It's going to be a function of the bedrooms. So in terms of the code that the city has, we'll be following that and looking at that. We'll have 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. We might have 3, but I doubt it. We're really kind of looking more for an urban lifestyle living. I think your report that you commissioned with Noel Consultant in 2016 had some really good identification of who we would be servicing, and we would agree with that, which would be more of junior 1 bedrooms to 1 bedroom and a den, 2 bedroom. So that would be fewer cars than a normal apartment complex that might have a lot more 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. So we're going to work on that mix, but we'll be looking towards the code and looking towards the lifestyle of people who would be there. But obviously, you do have a code on that, and we'll be respecting that and pointing out where we might see something of an opportunity on that. It could be, somewhere around another 300, 350. It could be a little bit more. At the 134 levels, we could support that. 134 spaces per level, sure. We could support that at the 5 levels.
Class of apartments, what class are they?
A.
A? Mm-hmm. And could you tell me, please, about when I know everything's up in the air and it all depends on this and this, but when do you think that work could start? Ballpark next year?
Well, we would be coming back also to seek your approval on this apartment complex along with the deck, and we'd look to start as quickly as we could, but it's market dependent financing. Hopefully our economy continues well. So there's a lot of unknowns, but we would like to advance it, subject to permitting and jurisdictional approvals and financing as quickly as we can.
And let me just throw this out there. This is on my wish list of a charging station for electric cars. If you have one of those considered for your property?
I think we can look at that for sure. I mean, that seems to be the way things are going with electric vehicles. I mean, there's some things where people are wondering if we're going to have a lot of cars in the next 15 years or so. So
that's on your radar.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to add to that. We do have all of the pre-wiring for an electric station for the retail space, and we had a unit that was shipped to us that would only serve the Tesla, and so we sent that back, and we've got another one coming that will serve all of the electric cars.
Good. Thank you so much.
Rob, I'd like to bring things down to maybe the lowest common denominator here. Basically, what you're asking is for the city to build 250 parking spaces at a minimum for residents of apartments that you're going to build at city cost of maybe $4 million. Am I wrong with that? Is that not correct?
We obviously like to find a way that it can work for the city and work for the development that we're looking at putting here.
You have 250 units. Those people need certain number of apartments. You don't want people shopping in town filling up all those parking spaces, and then when these guys get home from work, I got nowhere to park. So you got to build. Obviously, you got to build what you need.
Yes.
Plus the city's need. Right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. And so what
but
we
right
would
tonight, though, we're not asking for that. We are asking that the city council would allow us to study with their staff and the city manager an alternative here. And we want to be very sensitive to both the city's financial investment and to the investment that we're looking at with the apartments. So I know we had some initial discussions, but we're trying to weigh the best investment and location for the long term. And so we're not sure exactly what that number is. I know we had some discussions about what we would like to see. But as we spend a little bit more time thinking from the meeting that we had with you and the city manager, we really agree with you that boiling things down to the lowest common denominator is the first thing we got to do. Is this the right alternative location for a parking deck for the city? We know we need one, but would it make sense to do it together? And so we're just asking the city council right now, just in a very, let's initially study if this alternative is right for the city, and if it is, we can figure out what's right for each other in a public-private relationship.
Okay. Mr. Grant?
Yeah, I'm a fan of public-private partnerships and collaboration in theory, as from our perspective, as long as the public is not financing the private projects. And one of my concerns from the beginning, and I think the gentleman Clark Patterson Lee can tell you, my questions were: are we being short-sighted by locating our whole entire future parking needs in one location, depending on how downtown grows, with developments that are happening, down toward the mill and possibly, in other directions. That being said, I'm certainly open to options and some due diligence there. I'm certainly intrigued by, a parking deck that's wrapped with residential or retail. Other cities have done that correctly. I'm not a huge fan of decks just sitting out in the middle of the city. I think some of my colleagues here know my preferences of that you can design them and they're, beautiful looking decks, but they're still parking decks. But, and so there, are there options that we have, some here, some there? But, there are some practical considerations too that I think, we currently, you guys have dedicated 125 spaces to us. And, again, if we displace those spaces on the, ground level, I think we would need some assurance that we would have those on the ground level and on the deck. And I don't think, if we, use our funds to secure parking for our citizens, we would want that parking to be in the most convenient location, and levels for them. And I know I understand the mayor's concerns about, parking spaces for residents of the apartments. I think that could be controlled by,
Yes.
reserved parking spaces and those things. But if we're paying for parking for our citizens, that parking, our interest would be that that's in the most convenient locations for them possible. So those are just some of the concerns, and I think, I think I mentioned to you guys too, then sort of, cost efficiencies and things like ongoing maintenance, and security and maintenance of that, is the private enterprise, willing to absorb those costs, so, I mean, it all comes down to dollar and cents. So, I think options, at this time are, worth considering. But there's a lot of caveats that could go into that.
Right.
But if we're talking about, a month, truly talking about a month, but it's not something I want to drag on for a long time here, because we have certainly talked about this, and we know our merchants need parking, and our citizens have been asking for parking, but we certainly have just gotten this proposal tonight, and I know we've been working toward a design, and we may need to do some due diligence there so that we finish the design so we know what we're comparing apples to apples. But,
Agreed.
I think we need to kind of look at our options and look at the facts, look at the costs, look at the design, proposed designs, and, so we are comparing our options and what's our best options from a cost perspective and from a practical perspective. So.
I totally agree. I mean, what I heard tonight too, with the parking deck on this side, you'll be displacing 83 spaces for 300 spaces. So if I heard that correctly, it's only a net of 217 spaces, with that displacement. So displacement's important, and looking at location, fit, pedestrian plans, cost, the long term. Those are all things that really we're looking at, with your decision for us to work with the city manager and staff and us to collaborate over the next 30 days or so that we can kind of answer some more questions. And I agree, we want to compare apples to apples because I think the city needs to see, okay, what are their funds for Project A versus Project B? And there's obviously even a lot more to look at with the connectivity of the mill in terms of long-term economic growth and viability, connectivity to Academy and to downtown on a pedestrian plan and what that economic implementation of a good pedestrian plan could do. There'll be always alternatives of people wanting to take the trolley or, who knows, birds or scooters or bikes, but some people might want to walk, and it's great to have and some will probably drive. It's amazing. In Atlanta, they drive from one parking lot to the next parking lot. And it's just, in our character here in Atlanta. But, more and more people will walk or they'll have different options or Uber. But we just look to you to, we have a great idea that we'd like to share, and we'd like to work with the city, and we think the timing couldn't be any better to see if this is something you're interested in the next steps. Thank you.
Mr. Yon?
Well, I think I pretty much want to echo what my fellow council members have said, that this is not an option that I had even thought possible until I sat down with y'all and y'all showed it to me. And there are aspects of it I really like. There are questions I have, of course.
Sure.
But like I told Mr. Harris at the time, the devil's in the details, and we need the details.
Absolutely.
So I think it is absolutely in our best interest to get as many options on the table as possible and get those answers and get those details so we know what our options truly are.
Anyone else? Mr. Estes?
Yeah, just last point. I think I said it before. We definitely should consider have conversation about this. As Mr. Grant said, options are great. I think it'd also be great to, just having this time be able to click down a level. I think there's a lot of details, and so we can't get lost in the minutia yet, but continue to build upon, the ideas and thoughts, and really have like analysis paralysis, so to say. And I think it's also important to continue to bring our citizens along. I think as you guys have stated, we're responding to what our citizens have pulled together from comprehensive studies, other external studies, and I know when you talk to folks, there is just such a great love and passion and alignment for more to go on in our city. There's already a huge, even in the introductory stages with what's going on with the mill project and just creating that linkage and connectivity. I think, it's easy to get some good feedback from a lot of people really quickly as we continue to drill in and learn more about what this means. So, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. McGrew?
I think we'd be doing the city a disservice if we don't listen to all the options that are available to us. And I would throw this out there. If the details were good and it was a project that we could go along with, it would free up this property over here that we could do something with, sell it or put something of our own on it. So I think that would be a win and not tie it up with cars just sitting there all day and all night, that it could actually function.
Well, I don't think we ought to slow down. Our architects working on that. We need to. My opinion is we need to keep moving forward with the design on and the decision as to which alternative we like best from their perspective. And also at the same time, they can be working with staff and whomever they need to work with in order to come back with the details that we need to make a decision as to whether we go all the way out to bid for one parking deck down here or whether we do something over there. So I think we need both things moving, but we don't need to really, in my opinion, slow either one of them down.
One thing I would mention is, when we went out to bid on the parking deck, we hired a firm because we know that they have knowledge of parking, and we know they have great skill in it. If we thought we could do it as a staff, we would have done it as a staff. So the one concern that I would have is if we are looking at a public facility on that parcel, I would like the opportunity to sit down with our consultants that we've hired and figure out what it might cost to bring them in on that option so that they can help us with the design of that. They'll know more about what we need to do from a rating standpoint and what's going to be the most efficient. And if ultimately the city's going to be using public dollars on a parking facility, we've already gone through a proposal to find a firm that we're confident in. I think they should be at the table on this option as well, so that they can provide that feedback to the city.
Okay. Completely agree.
Anyone else?
I could just, if I could add to that, we've been spending a lot of time with our specialty parking consultant, Metromont, and they've designed all the parking decks at Northside Hospital, as well as many decks here throughout the southeast. And we can bring that as another tool at the table, working with you and your consultants, and so that we can get and achieve the best ideas. But Metromont is a specialty consultant that has helped with both the layout, and we're asking them to look at more things. So I applaud, we have that available to work with both the city manager and staff, with Metromont, who's our consultant on the deck. And I'll let Mark speak to that.
At no additional cost.
That's on our dime.
That's always good.
You can't beat that.
No additional cost is always good. Anyone else have a question, comments? Thank you, Rob.
All right, thank you.
Mark, thank you. Okay. We have the consideration to approve the minutes, which are in your agenda package. Mr. Mayor, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Which one did I miss?
They're not in the minutes. They're not in the agenda.
Oh, okay, I see. We should have left that item off there. Okay, financial statements are in your agenda package, and if anyone has any questions, Nathan is here to answer those.
Jeannie, can we ask one more thing?
Sure.
We were asking for a motion to extend this. Does this mean
We normally don't vote at
okay.
the work session, but if council particularly wants to, that's up to them. But normally, the work session is for the discussion purposes, and then we vote normally on the 15th, the second meeting.
Okay. But everyone's.
I don't know why we would even vote for y'all to move forward with a
correct. It seemed like everyone was anxious to keep this rolling, so we want to keep. We want to keep it rolling.
I think so. I mean, I don't think anyone objects to your pursuing that avenue to bring back more details in the plan that you have.
Sounds like an acknowledgement. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Okay. All right. Anyone have any questions on the financial statements? Mr. Grant.
Just a couple quick ones. Mr. Ingram, on the turn-on fees, I see we're kind of substantially under budget. I was just curious about that, why they seem lower than on the water than what we budgeted.
I'll be more than happy to look into that. Those are obviously driven by development, new activation. So I would think they would be consistent with, their 60-70% throughout the year. So I'll look into it and get a response back.
I was curious because my next question on the impact fees, which all seem substantially higher, and I was going to ask, is that because of development?
It is, yes, sir.
That was
a lot of the apartment complex.
And then in addition, we also increased the impact fee, if you recall, back in April. And so that wasn't accounted for when we did the initial revenue estimates last summer with the budget.
That explains it. So that's good news. And I was just curious. It's not way off, but it was just jumped out at me. And
I will look into it, though.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else have a question? Okay. Does not require council approval, so It's for informational purposes only. 10-minute public input. We had no one to sign up for that this evening. Under new business, discussion of road closures, parks and recreation. Manager Adam Dodson, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I'm here on behalf of Reinhardt College Born to Run 5K for Cherokee Scholars. They are looking to do road closure on November 2nd in downtown. The road closure will begin at 8 a.m. The race starts out in front of the Water Authority. From there, it will make one full loop around the square, continue on West Main to East Main, go down to Jeanette, come out Mural, come back down North Street, and finish at the Water Authority. Any questions?
This is the pre-existing 5K route that's been used?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No. Discussion of proposed changes to the Canton City Code of Ordinances, Chapter 18, Article 2, Occupational Tax. Chief Financial Officer Nathan Ingram.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. If Council recalls, back in March, we had a presentation on our Phase 1 of the Occupational Tax Review. Ms. Rachel Bembry with Jack Consultant came and gave a presentation. Our first phase upon completion was really to change the city's occupational tax structure from the old SIC, the Standard Industry Classification, to the North American Industrial Classification, NAICS. And I mentioned at that time, it was March 21st, it was approved by council. I mentioned at that time I'd be bringing back the ordinance to reflect simply that change from SIC to NAICS. You have in front of you a marked up draft of the new ordinance. And really, that ordinance already had a lot of the nomenclature, the verbiage of NAICS in it. But one thing I wanted to do is I removed the tax ratio tables and the SIC, the 2 pages of the SIC from that, and I refer to them with wording only. And one of the reasons I did that was because the NAICS table is approximately 24 pages long. And furthermore, with the tax ratio tables, when we go into Phase 2, when we make any changes, we very well may be changing that again. So Mr. Dyer may want to opine upon that, but I think referring to those just within the ordinance may be adequate, may be sufficient instead of incorporating them verbatim. But that's essentially what you see in front of you, just that change.
Any questions about that? I think we've talked about this for quite a few months, off and on. And so is this something that you would recommend for adoption at the next meeting?
Yes, sir.
And its implementation time frame would be when? January? When the renewal of business licenses?
It would be for the 2020 year.
2020 business licenses
yes,
by, what's that, by March 31st? Or
yes, sir. That's correct.
Yeah.
They'll be going, renewal applications will be going out in January.
Okay. Any questions? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
Discussion of the annual GDOT list of roads. I assume these are for speed limits? Okay.
They are. pretty short and sweet there. So, yeah.
Anybody have any questions on those? No question. That was short.
That's very easy.
We like it. Discussion of the amendment to truck route ordinance. Mr. Peppers.
Ms. Wilson had asked that we look into limiting through traffic to trucks on certain roadways. And so in our ordinance as it's written right now, we have a restricted area, but it's basically what I'll say the downtown core of the city. And so what we've done is we've provided for you a map that outlines specific roads in the city that would be considered through roads, where there's a connection on both ends to something that somebody would be using for a cut through, for instance. So an example of that would be Golf Course Road and Longview Street. under the way the ordinance would be amended, we would list out those roads and then we would post signs about no through traffic as part of the restricted area. That would give the police department the opportunity to enforce citations against trucks that are just cutting through for whatever reason. What we've done is we've listed a bunch of them on here for you to consider. By no means do we have to adopt all of them, but we tried to look at those streets that are connection points between some type of roadway. So, for instance, we provide street maintenance to Marietta Highway from Herndon Lane all the way down to at 575. Well, really, the only reason why a through truck would want to take that roadway is to get from 575 to Highway 20. Well, they can already do that on state-maintained roadways by going up to exit 19 and taking Riverstone and Marietta Highway. So the idea there would be that you would limit that through truck access to city-maintained streets and hopefully improve public safety on those streets and also reduce the impact on our structures. There's a couple on here that are a little bit different. For instance, I've included Great Sky Parkway and Reservoir Drive just because you can technically get from State Route 140 to Reinhardt College Parkway taking that route. But Reinhardt College Parkway and State Route 140 are maintained by GDOT. So our preference would be that any through truck would not go through a neighborhood and take a city street, but would stay on GDOT's right-of-ways. So that's what we've considered in here. Probably the biggest highways are those areas of Marietta Highway from Herndon to exit 14, sections of Prominence Point Parkway, Northside Cherokee Boulevard, Northside Parkway. Part of the issue that we've seen is that the county has restricted access for trucks on East Cherokee Drive. And so we get a number of trucks that are traveling State Route 140 that are attempting to get to the landfill and ball ground. They can't take East Cherokee anymore, so they're taking 140 to Northside Cherokee Parkway, going up to exit 19, and then going north on 575 to get to ball ground. So they're traveling on our roads. There's garbage that's coming off the vehicles. If we restrict the access to that road, the trucks would be forced to take 140 to 575, take 575 up to the ball ground exit, and basically bypass the city's roadways.
What would be the classification of trucks that would be prohibited?
It's listed in the ordinance. It talks about vehicles over 6 wheels.
6, okay.
I don't know that I included that particular section.
So it's
in
based
what I
on wheels
posted.
and not on weight, right?
It was based on wheels.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Goodman?
Over 6 wheels.
Yeah, I've noticed several times lately, tractor trailers going down to golf course, and I don't know if they're going through Longview, but I can't imagine them. I wouldn't want to meet one down through there, very curvy road, and I've seen that 3 or 4 times in the last month.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't know if they're not reading the signs or just not obeying the signs, but something's happening there. Would that be something that we're going to?
Yeah, those streets are listed on here as restricted areas.
But it's nothing that would prevent a delivery. I mean,
That's correct.
If they're going to a particular place, they can go through there.
I don't think this was a delivery because it was a food truck. They were delivering, food.
Yeah.
And it was an 18-wheeler.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Estes?
So today, can trucks travel on Northside Cherokee?
Yes.
So this is an updated and an amended one. And so the issue is that windy downhill, that's county maintained roads?
That's state maintained.
State on 140, okay. I guess my only feedback would be it just seems very logical. It's just such a wide 2-lane road, and it comes to another point which goes, especially with that, like, why would we have our PD take on that responsibility to look at citations for that,
So in the past, our public safety did have some control over certain truck regulations in the state. And then the state actually took those back from local governments. And so we're in a situation where in a lot of cases on trucks and truck weights and things like that, we have to rely on the state to be able to enforce certain restrictions, and they just don't have the manpower to do it.
Mm-hmm. Which I would argue we don't either.
But we do have a responsibility to
I
make
mean,
sure that
I'm
our
sure
roads,
you do. I'm just going, wouldn't you want
Well-
them like patrolling other stuff,
Well,
not going?
Well, so ultimately, the question is, where you have a roadway that you pay for 100% maintenance,
Yeah.
do you want trucks that are just passing through, tearing
So-
up the roadway because you can't enforce certain restrictions on them?
So, good question. No, but then is anyone really? Do we also want our police department spending more time on that? You know, again, that's just general comment there.
Chief? Yeah, absolutely.
Or will they? Because we put signs on Golf Course Road, but delivery trucks for food go through still. You know.
I think if there's signage in an ordinance, we can enforce that ordinance. The signage just for the truck being there.
Yeah.
If the officer found numerous violations that was a safety hazard, then we would call the Department of Motor
Okay.
Vehicles, the code compliance. And
Yeah.
we could call
And again, my concern or my comments aren't, could you do it? I have full faith that absolutely the police department could do it because we give them the tools and ordinance. And I just go, it's kind of like the smoking ordinance, right? You know, we said you can't smoke and then we expanded it, but everyone still smokes on the street. So it's just a distraction for your department. But again, I'm just trying to simplify, you know, in a world where we keep adding ordinances, is it, you know, does that road need to be on there? Yes or no? I don't know.
I think what you'll also find is some of these trucks, they don't tarp. And
So
some of these are
garbage.
trash hauling trucks, and a lot of the trash comes out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some of the operations that the Marshal Service has done before. And I think that was one of the bigger problems they were having on East Cherokee. So it would also minimize some of that stuff.
Okay. My last question is just on, you highlighted Riverstone Boulevard and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Help me understand what's going on there. There's a lot of trucks that have to go up there for it's zoned commercial and industrial up that way, right?
So in this instance, Riverstone Parkway is state maintained.
Mm-hmm.
Reinhardt College Parkway is state maintained. There's really no reason for them to use the cut through of Riverstone Boulevard, which is city maintained, to get back over to Reinhardt College Parkway.
So it's
The only reason they would be on there would be to either bypass that intersection of Reinhardt and Riverstone, which is a safer intersection, or because they're making a delivery in that area. If they're making a delivery
they
in
have
that
to
area,
be
there's
there.
no
Okay,
issue anyway.
I got it. Okay. Thank you.
You know what, Ms. Wilson?
I just want to commend you for following up on this. I had a citizen talk to me about Cherokee Northside Boulevard. He had been observing so many trucks traveling that road, and it is tearing it up. And we had to pay a lot of money for that road. That's the city and the Cherokee, Northside Cherokee paid for that road, and we're going to have to fix it whenever the trucks tear it up. So I appreciate that we followed up on that at a citizen's request. So I think it's very, very much needed that we keep trucks off Northside Cherokee Boulevard, as well as the others. But that one I wanted to mention in particular because that was the one that I had mentioned.
Yeah, I agree. Northside Parkway is cracking severely. And if we have another bad winter, it's going to come apart. Mr. Young?
Yeah, there's one, just an example, there's one particular road you and I have discussed before, and I cannot think of the name of it right offhand. It's in South Canton between the Beauty Pearl Salon and the used car lot.
Morris Hill.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. The reason I mention that is we were having a problem with GPS sending trucks up there, and they just physically don't fit. Have we looked at any areas that we're aware of like that we could put signs up so that the trucks know not to even turn there?
We could look into that, absolutely.
Yeah, because I know that particular one, the truck wound up taking a corner off the building because they just simply didn't fit. And they were just following their GPS. So I would like to look at roads like that too, maybe not on the first list, but that we could add or be aware of.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Discussion and possible action of selling parcel 91N 16068 on West Marietta Street.
The city has a small parcel of .08 acres that is on West Marietta Street, and staff would just recommend to council that we don't technically have a use for the parcel. There have been some discussions about some development plans on that particular road, and we would suggest that council entertain surplusing the property and using a sealed bid method to sell the property if we don't have a use for it.
Any questions about that? Okay, then that would be coming up for a vote on the 15th. Okay. All right. All right, city manager's report.
The only item I have tonight is I wanted to update you on a consent order that we received from EPD. If you recall, last July, and I've given you a copy of this, last July we had a sewer spill in the Anderson Avenue area behind the apartments. And we knew we were going to get some type of fine off of that because, you know, the line broke and we ended up with some raw sewage that went into the river. We received a consent order that was tied to 3 particular issues that we've seen over the last year between that date and February. The first issue was that spill at Anderson Avenue. The second issue was a raised level of phosphorus that we had in discharge. We have been working with sampling systems to try to locate where that additional phosphorus is coming from. And we saw an uptick in it when school let out and have seen that before. We think that's possibly the use of certain chemicals in the schools to strip the floors. And so that's something that we've been working on, but we've been trying to track. We had a little bit more phosphorus in certain locations, and we tracked a little bit of that into the industrial park area, and then it would die off. In meeting with EPD, basically what they said was, even though we exceeded our limits and there would be a fine associated with that, any money that we spent on trying to rectify or find out about that situation would be credited towards our fine. So if we're trying to improve something, they're not going to charge us for that. And then we also have some issues related to our reuse water line that basically takes gray water or treated wastewater and ships it up to the golf course. And in that scenario, we had exceeded limits on fecal coliform, and then came back and figured out that we could inject some chemicals into that would kill off the fecal coliform before it was received at the golf course. So we've been working on that. Those are listed in this consent order. Basically, what we're agreeing to with this is that we sign it. They've got 30 days to take any public comment on it. At the end of 30 days, they'll sign the agreement. We'll have a 45-day period where we will submit a corrective action plan. Some of these we've been working on already, like the additional sampling and working on the gray water. They'll review that corrective action plan. Once it's approved, we'll have a period of time to come back into compliance on those things. Any cost that we spend relative to that corrective action plan will be placed up against whatever fine they might initiate. So at this point, I believe the fine is right around $50,000. We've already spent close to 25 to 30 on some of the testing and things that we've been doing already. Probably by the time the corrective action plan is done, the improvements we've made will outweigh what the fine would be, and there won't be a fine associated. But we do have to sign a consent order basically acknowledging that these are issues that we're working on within our system.
I suspect we probably need to get approval from the council to sign that consent order. And we probably need to do that now because it was due in like a total of 15 days, I think, and it's been about a week or a little better. So I would entertain a motion to allow the mayor to sign that consent order and return it to the Department of Natural Resources, the Environmental Protection Division.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Yon made the motion. Mr. Goodwin seconded it. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voting for the motion. Okay, that's all.
That's
I
it.
have. Okay. I have a couple of things here since we disposed of that one. That was one thing that I came across that we needed to deal with. But as some of you know, Carol Day, who had spent a good bit of time, a number of years, in fact, on our Planning and Zoning Committee, has stepped down and resigned. And I will be nominating Rick Zenna to fill the unexpired term, which actually ends December 31st of this year. Mr. Zenna is a retired financial controller for the IT industry, and he lives in the Soleil area. So, and he has a real interest in the development of the community. Also, as you know, we will have a need for a parent need here at this point for a mayor pro tem. If our current mayor pro tem, Mr. Grant, runs for mayor, then obviously he will be resigning from the council. And in order to avoid not having a mayor pro tem for a period of time, I'm going to nominate Ferris Yon to fill that position. That would come in at the 15th meeting, because if we waited until September, we would be a period of time. Now, qualifying, as you know, is after the 15th, but it's before our next meeting in September, certainly. So there would be several days there that, a few weeks even, that we'd be without one. And I think it's important that we have one. So I will nominate Ferris to do that, and we will act on those items on the 15th. We also got a letter from Senator David Perdue congratulating the city on being a tree city, a national tree city in the United States, which is something we've been doing for quite a number of years, and which is a good thing. And yet sometimes I wonder how we're a tree city when we allow such clear cutting for developments and so forth. There ought to be a better way than what happens there, but at this point we do try to protect our trees. We try to plant trees occasionally and develop parks, recreational areas, trails. So I think we're doing our part to keep trees in mind here. All right, that's all I have. If there's a motion to adjourn, that's all. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to remind council and visitors that there is a Ward 1 Town Hall on August 20th at 6 p.m. at Chattahoochee Tech. The focus will be on Ward 1, though everyone who lives in the area is invited to attend, even county people who are affected by Highway 140. Our focus will be on the infrastructure, development, what else? Planning, public safety, and pretty much anything else. Please come with your questions, and we'll have some staff there to make some presentations and give you some information. And I see that we have half of our P&Z board here, and I really would love for you to attend.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Mr. Grant?
Yes, I just want to take a brief moment. Some of you may remember a issue we had several months ago regarding a curb cut and some right-of-way issues on the street that I live on, Britt Street, and some of you may have seen some construction going on this week. And in the process of those improvements, there was my my sewer line was hit, my water line was hit, and we found a lot of things underneath there. So it's been a real process, but I just want to personally thank and publicly thank Bethany Watson, who's been over there every day, and other CD members, but she's been over there every day, handling contractors, handling citizens, irate citizens, and I've tried not to be too irate, but some mornings before coffee, maybe not. But I just want to thank her today on top of everything else. There was another issue in another neighborhood that a constituent contacted me about concerning some irrigation matters and issues, and I contacted Bethany, and within 24 hours, this is something they've been working on for over 6 months, and she had that resolved. And so I just wanted to thank her publicly and appreciate her great work. So,
Good. Thank you, Bill. Mr. Peppers.
I believe Miss Belinda Hardy has a couple of announcements.
Oh,
It's okay.
I had forgotten you. Yeah, if I don't make a note here, I will forget it. You could have already been gone if I'd had you at the first of the meeting, could you?
Okay, good evening. See, we saved the best for last. This is awesome. Okay, so, I always read for this because I don't want to miss anything. It's been a really busy time in the Main Street office. Again, we are just, it's awesome. I say the word awesome so much, but it is, because we've just got so many things going on, and it's a wonderful time. We are doing now, I know all of you are doing it in your seats right now, the Please Don't Rain on First Friday dance. And continue to do that dance. Okay, so go home tonight and do that dance. So I'm going to go ahead and just say it because we're going to have it. Join us for a block party from 6 to 9, featuring live music by Skipper Grace, a cruise in, food trucks, kids' activities, and late night shopping. So keep dancing. No rain. The farmers market continues to have great success. Last Saturday, we enjoyed the Tomato Sandwich Festival. That was my first one. That was nice. I've learned what type of mayonnaise is the best. And we had 62 growers, food vendors, and artisans in attendance. This Saturday, we'll have the pie contest. And right now, we have 60 vendors that are going to participate that day. So if you have decided that you're baking, please make sure you bring those. Great things are happening at the theater. Our kids' summer movie series was a huge hit with sold-out shows for each performance. The Saturday night, date night movies will begin Saturday, August the 10th, presented by LGE. The movies will be The Wedding Singer, Top Gun, Dirty Dancing, and Pretty Woman. Kristen is doing a phenomenal job at the theater, and we are just so excited and proud that she's on our team. We have another fun-filled weekend coming up this month, which will be toward the middle of the month. Luckily, members only offer to reschedule. So on the 16th of August, we're having a back-to-school bash in Brown Park. We'll have food and beverage vendors along with activities for the kids. So bring your blanket and your chair and come out and celebrate the beginning of a new school year. The following morning, then we'll be back with the farmers market, and that day we'll have the watermelon eating contest. That evening, we'll kick off our date night series at the theater with Dirty Dancing, and then Kentucky Headhunters will be performing at Canton River Rocks at Etowah River Park. That's a lot to say. This part I'm really excited about. I'll be attending the Georgia Downtown Association Conference in Jekyll at the end of the month. The city manager and I will be sharing a proud moment as we accept on behalf of the city of Canton the award for Best Facade. I'm excited to say that the Jones Mercantile Building was selected as the winner from all the facade entries across the state. And I would also like to thank Angela for creating a beautiful presentation of the Jones Building. She was able to convey the history and the history so wonderfully. So thank you for that. But yeah, we're going to get to go and get another award.
That's great.
So that is great that we submitted that and they acknowledged that. And so we'll go and submit and accept that for you. All right. Anything else?
Okay. Anyone else? Okay.
Right,
Thank you.
good deal.
Thank you very much. Okay. If nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Grant made the motion. Mr. Goodwin seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Okay.
Let's give them a
I know.
Is Ellen at church?